Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. We certainly appreciate your attendance this morning, Laying the Foundation for Successful HMI SCADA Projects, Design Like a Pro series. My name is Don Pearson. I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer with Inductive Automation Software, and I'll be your host today. And once again, welcome to this morning's webinar. Because we have a lot of folks who I think are new, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and introduce Inductive Automation, a little bit of background on the company. We really were, in 2003, pioneers in database-centric web-launched HMI and SCADA systems. And it's really turned out to be extremely popular, applied in a variety of industries, 55-plus countries now around the world. You can see some of those industries that are mentioned here. Also, I might point out that we're really proud of the software, the innovation, and how it's been recognized. We were the recipients of Oracle's Duke's Choice Award, which is awarded for innovative use of Java in the industrial software industry. Also Automation World Reader's Choice Award, awarded for innovation in SCADA information management. What is Ignition? In a nutshell, it's a web-managed platform with web-launched clients, web-launched designer, really an industrial application server. What can it do? Those of you who are familiar with it know this, but HMI SCADA MES functionality, historian functionality using any SQL database, business applications using any SQL database, recipes, batch management functionality, really practically anything that you can imagine you can do with Ignition. What makes it so special? I think this list here pretty much summarizes it. It's sold by the server, which means you have unlimited free web launch clients, unlimited free concurrent web launch designers, free data points, free database connections to any SQL database, free screens, free projects per server, free scalability, and a free OPC UA server and drivers. And it's also totally cross-platform, whether it's Windows 32 or 64-bit Linux or OS X. In this Design Like a Pro series, I want to say just a couple things also as a last point before I get into that, and that is that we're really committed in Inductive Automation to your success. And those of you who know us know that this isn't just some lip service that we do. So whether it's support or training or design services, we're going to do whatever we need to do to assist you to achieve your project goals or your facilities goals. So whether you happen to be an integrator or end user, let us know what you need to do, and we can be of help in any way we can to help you achieve that. So please also, throughout this webinar, note the questions tab on the console and use it to type in any questions you have, because the last 10 to 15 minutes we're going to be taking questions. We'll get to as many of those as we possibly can, or we'll answer them offline. So we've heard from a lot of our customers about how they're using Ignition to create projects that increase productivity and deliver results. It also happens to be part of our mission to offer the Ignition community the tools and support it needs to design great projects. That's why we're bringing together this three-part series of webinars and white papers. Those of you who have seen our evolution have seen a lot more white papers being distributed and posted on our website. We're going to back those up throughout 2012 with a number of presentations and webinars, starting with this design series to help you be more effective. So this three-part series is really starts with laying the foundation for successful HMI SCADA projects. And in this webinar today, we'll cover what you need to do to create a solid foundation for your HMI SCADA project. Part 2, developing dynamic HMI SCADA projects with speed and precision. And the next webinar will focus then on how to use power object-oriented design tools to streamline your project development process. And finally, designing HMI SCADA projects that deliver results in Part 3. We'll talk about putting the finishing touches on your project and launching it effectively so you can deliver results from day one. So Design Like a Pro Part 1, just to expand a little bit more. There's a lot that's riding the success of your HMI SCADA project. So a good project can increase productivity and profitability, and anybody knows also a bad project can cost time and money. So a solid foundation is key to building that good project. If you don't build your project on a good foundation, and problems later in the process can totally derail that whole progress that you've made. So there's 4 things you really need to know to lay that foundation for a successful project. 1, the 3 major project development phases. 2, the questions you must ask to define your project. 3, what makes up a solid project architecture, and 4, how to create an action plan. Just want to make one note also here is that Ignition really is designed to help you really create great projects and really help with design. But the information we'll cover in this series can be applied to your project development process no matter what SCADA software you're using. Because Ignition is designed specifically to empower you to design great projects, it will be the design environment we'll be using in this series. It actually was created to alleviate specific pain points that can impede the progress of an HMI SCADA project. It's a full-featured, powerful tool kit for designing the full spectrum between HMI, SCADA, and MES projects. And with unlimited clients, unlimited tags and connections like I mentioned before, and a powerful object-oriented design environment, these are all advantages that Ignition offers to help you design great projects. So really the whole point is it gives you the freedom to stop worrying about your software, what it will do and what it won't do, and start doing what you need to do to design a great project. The simplicity of Ignition makes it possible to do that, as you'll see as we progress. Moving into today's speakers, first thing I'd like to do is introduce Travis Cox. He oversees our technical support services. He's also been teaching our training courses since the beginning and has trained hundreds of people on how to use Ignition. So Travis, I'm going to let you take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us maybe a little bit what kind of training courses do you teach?
Thank you, Don. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Travis Cox. Again, I'm the Director of Training and Support Services here for Inductive Automation. I've actually been with the company since the beginning, back in 2003. So I'm an expert on the software, and as Don said, I've trained over hundreds of people with the Ignition platform. And we're very excited to offer 3 unique training classes here at Inductive Automation. One is a 5-day core Ignition class, which covers the basics features of Ignition. The second is a 3-day advanced class that goes over more advanced features, how to really template projects and make the most out of the Ignition features that are there. And lastly, we offer a 4-day OEE training class, which covers the OEE and downtime module here that we have for the Ignition platform.
Travis, thanks. Kevin McCluskey, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself too, but Kevin is a lead designer, support engineer for our design services area. He runs the design teams, and Kevin has been doing that for quite a while now, and his design services department provides expert consulting for designing and implementing Ignition HMI SCADA projects. So Kevin, with a brief introduction here, what kind of work does you and your team at Design Services do?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Well, we're here to help. So very simply, customers with all types of projects approach us and say, hey, can you help out with this? Can you help us design this piece? We're the experts on Ignition. We're happy to do that. We provide advice and assistance on all sorts of projects, and we really deliver something that helps move things along.
Kevin, thanks so much. I want to let Travis take over here. And as I turn it over to you, Travis, you can view, and I know you and Kevin are going to sort of go back and forth on your presentation. I'll just let you run it from here. So with that, Travis Cox.
All right, thank you, Don. Well, like Don said, today we're going to cover laying the foundation for successful HMI SCADA projects. And really, there are 3 phases for developing a project, and that is phase 1, planning, phase 2 is design, and phase 3 is startup. These 3 major project phases are a roadmap to your project success. We know not every project is the same, but in general, this is a really solid structured approach to developing new HMI SCADA projects. So we're going to focus on the planning phase today, and we'll cover the design and startup phase in more detail in future webinars. So for the first phase, planning, which I feel is the most important phase of all, that deals with proper planning that is really vital to your project's success because it will lay the foundation for the whole thing. So there really are 3 main steps in the planning phase. Each of these is again key to laying that foundation. The first step is defining your project. Before you can start on a journey, you have to figure out where you're going. So defining the problems your project is intended to solve is essential in order to find solutions to them. Step 2 is project architecture. Before you can create something, you have to be able to visualize it. Establish an overarching Structure for your project is about seeing how all the pieces fit together. And step 3, plan of action. You must create a plan of action. Success just doesn't happen. You have to plan for it. Formulating a plan to complete your project is necessary to make your project get done on time and within budget. So in order to really show you how you would plan a project from start to finish and how you go through the structure, I'm going to come over to Kevin to talk about a company that we're going to use as a model.
So let me introduce you to Widgets Unlimited. For the sake of this series, as Travis mentioned, we're going to use this company as we go along to illustrate a number of key design points. We'll be building an example project as we move through all 3 phases of planning, design, and startup. Our sample project will be for this manufacturer that makes widgets. I'm sure you're all familiar with widgets. Widgets Unlimited called us. They want to use Ignition to help them get their manual process automated. They're completely manual right now. They're looking to automate things. And as we go through, we'll learn a little bit more about Widgets Unlimited. In order to start our project, we're going to have to define it. To do that, we have to start answering questions.
So as part of the planning phase, questions are vital to the success of the project. And you have to, in order to really define it, you must start asking and answering certain questions. You really have to use your questions to probe the customer for the information that you need. Remember that most of the time when you make a project, the people involved won't know what they want. And sometimes what they want might not be what they need. So defining a project is about getting all the cards on the table, finding out as much information as possible, and then you can tackle the project with a clear vision of what is going on. So you need to answer questions about function. What do you need to include in the application? Usage. How are the operators going to be using the system? Deadlines, of course, when do you need this application or the project to be completed? What hardware are you going to be using? Where's the software going to be installed? And what's the hardware of the client machines? Software. Well, what software package are you going to use? And first and foremost, and of course, are there any packages that you want to connect up to, like ERP systems or MES applications? And lastly, it's security, which is another important topic. You have to ask what people can do when they're in the application, what they have access to. So these questions, we're going to go through a few of the questions here in the webinar, give you an idea of what you need to ask. There's a full list of questions that can be found in the white paper that accompanies this webinar, Design Like a Pro, Part 1, Laying the Foundation. And the white paper is available on our website and will also be sent to each of you via email. So let's look at some of the questions in more detail, specifically for Widgets Unlimited.
So as we approached Widgets Unlimited, we needed to ask them all these questions that we've been going through. And we ended up asking them all of the questions in the white paper, but we've just highlighted a few here in order to present them to you. The first one and the foremost, function, what do you need the project to do? That's going to be a key question for any project that you're on. As Travis mentioned, customers normally will give you a certain answer that'll just focus on one thing specifically, and you need to probe a little bit to get a little deeper. So we asked them, what do you want this to do? And they said, well, we want real-time status and control for line 1 and line 2. And so then we went back to them and they said, well, what about alerting? Do you want alerting? And they're like, oh, yeah, we want alerting. Do you want historical data and logging? Yeah, we want that. We want to see trends of all of our data points. So really probing and looking for what they want in a complete system, what the customer, what management wants, whoever the key players are, is key to people really feeling at the end of the project like they have something solid and they have exactly what they want. Next question here we have is who will be using the project? What will they be using it for? And this is important because it really outlines the use cases. It outlines how should you design the project, how should you design the first pages, the overview, and where should you really focus on the customer. The next slide that we have here, we've got another 4 questions, and these are pretty straightforward. Deadline, when does the project need to be launched? That's to give you a pretty solid time frame for knowing how to plan things out. Hardware, what will you be connecting to? In this case, they told us that they have Control Logics, they have a MicroLogix PLC, they have a Microsoft SQL Server, and as you'll see a little bit later in the demonstration, they also have MySQL on the plant floor. What operating systems are you using? That's important for some software packages. In the case of Ignition, it's multi-platform, so it's not as important. Security, how are you going to authenticate? You need to find out if you're going to tie in with their existing authentication schemes, Active Directory or whatever they're using, or if they want to use their own.
So as you see a few of the questions, I mean, these questions you need to really ask your customers and probe them for the information to lay that foundation. Once you have asked these questions, it's now up to you to start building a project architecture. This architecture is another important step. You need to first lay out the inventory functions. Basically list out all the functions that your project needs to do in order of importance. That way you get a good, clear picture of what's going on. So really this project architecture is like a blueprint for your project. It's an inventory of all the pieces of the structure and how they fit together. So once you have the inventory functions, we need to look at what kind of screens we got to build. So I'd list out all the functions and then sketch an outline of the screens for the project and how they all connect together. The more detailed, the better. Your sketch should reflect both what functions need to be on the screen and how they connect together. So this is something you can sit down with the customer and just really sketch out what you want to see, how you want things to be connected. It really helps when you're actually in the design process, which we're going to get to in the next webinar, and how you would lay out the foundation of the project. Next thing you have to do is identify the key data points. Identifying all the data points will help make your project work nicely. And these data points, really, we recommend creating an I/O checklist. Look at all of the PLCs you have and document in an Excel spreadsheet all the tags that are there, what each of the tags are supposed to be doing, what their address is, so that you can really get a clear picture of what you need to bring into Ignition or into whatever application you're planning on using. Because if you know what you're going to bring in, then it's a matter of getting right to creating the screens rather than having to go through each one of them and somehow figuring out what they mean later on. Lastly, you might need to define a database structure. Creating a database structure can be important if you're doing things that are above and beyond the basic history, where you're maybe doing recipe management. You got to figure out how you're going to store the recipes in your database. So there are certain times where you need to look at the database in more detail. Ignition handles a lot of the database structures for you by creating the tables automatically. So it's one easier thing about the product. So with this architecture, project architecture, we can show you kind of some of the sketches that we did for the Widgets Unlimited application.
So what we have here is a basic outline of how we decided to plan out the project from Widgets Unlimited. They gave us feedback on exactly what they wanted. They gave us an outline, and we put that together. So I'll just go down the left of the screen here. On the overview is something standard that you'll have for any project. They also told us they want controls. They want real-time and status and control on line 1 and line 2. So we decided to turn that into its own heading there, along with a couple of sub-items. Trending, the same thing. They wanted graphs for different data points on each one of those lines. So we created that. Alarms belongs in its own section in this case because it's pretty important to the project. They wanted a recipe system, so we set that up, and it had 2 different recipe management sections that they wanted. So that's recipe 1, recipe 2. Reports, we added a production report and a shift report, and then for the administration section there, they have an item for manage users, and that also, since it's a sub-item, it allows us to expand later on.
So using that information, the sketches and our project architecture, we can really start developing a plan of action. The plan of action is a plan basically for getting everything done. If you don't set up project milestones and timeframes, then you won't be able to prioritize what project tasks need to be done. So first, you got to create an ordered task list. List out all the actionable tasks necessary to complete your project in the order of importance. Start general, but get specific. Actionable tasks need to have a time frame attached to them. Then we need to match those tasks with assets. Match up available personnel with the tasks they are best suited for. If one person is really, really good at database architectures, then he should be the one creating, creating special tables or working with a database. If there's somebody that's really, really good at real-time stats, control screens, have a good aesthetic, they should be creating those type of overview screens. If you're by yourself, then you may need to, look at extra tools, training, or help to get things done yourself. Some integrators they only have one person. Finding all this information out early will ensure that the project doesn't come to a halt later on. So once we've matched those tasks with the assets, then we can put these tasks on a timeline. Putting tasks and project milestones on a timeline in order of their priority will hold your team accountable for getting things done and keep the project on track. A good project schedule should alleviate stress, not cause it. So definitely, if you have that deadline, you want to make sure that you can get things done in the appropriate amount of time. Don't cut yourself short. The last thing you want to do is promise that you can do it in 2 hours. It's going to take you 4 days. So really start to think about the timeline, because I think it is really, really crucial in successful projects. If you don't have the timeline correct, you're going to cause a lot of stress later on. So with that, we've created a small little task list for Widgets Unlimited that we can start out with the very first phases.
The task list for Widgets Unlimited has several different sections, but we've just outlined the first ones here, which the first step is connect to PLCs. Second is connect to the databases. The third is create the navigation scheme. The fourth is customize navigation. This really gives us a foundation upon which to build the rest of the project.
Okay. So with this, we're actually going to give you a short demonstration of how to do this in Ignition. And the first thing we're going to go to is the Ignition Gateway. When you install Ignition, since this is a platform we're going to use and demo, since it is our product here, when you first install it, you will get access to this web page called the Ignition Gateway. And Ignition gets installed on a central server, on a single machine. It's the only place you have to install any software. From there, you can go to any computer in your network and open up a web browser, and you can type in the IP address of the host name of the server, followed by the port that it runs on. So Ignition, this is the URL at the top to get to the Ignition Gateway. Once we're on the gateway, we can see all the projects we have configured. Of course, this is a brand new installation, so there are no projects. We're going to show you how you can start one from scratch and get that going. But we can see all the projects. We can see everything we're connected to, get an overall status. The status page gives us more in-depth information about what's going on in Ignition. How many clients we have open, how many designers we have open, how the databases, the connections, how are they working, how the device is handling. And last, we have the configuration section where we can actually log in and set up connection points, get connected to PLCs, get connected to databases, and so on. With Ignition, we have basically the client and the designer is web launched, which means that you can, from this web page, click on a link to download the application onto that client machine. There's nothing you have to have pre-installed in order to do so. You can go get a brand new computer from Dell or from any manufacturer, plug it into your network, and you can launch the actual runtime of your project. The designer is included with the system. You don't have to pay anything extra for it. This allows you to actually develop that project. So we're going to give you a little insight to how we make connection points and how we can open up the designer to create a new project. So Kevin's going to take over here and show you how, for Widgets Unlimited, how we can get connected to the PLCs and databases that they have.
So in this case, for Widgets Unlimited, they gave us a very standard, simple spreadsheet, which is something that we'll often see in a project, where they give us connectivity information for each of the PLCs right here. They give us connectivity information for each of the databases. The PLCs, they give us an IP. They tell us what type of PLC it is. That's all you really need. Databases, right here, IP, type of database, the instance in the case of Microsoft SQL Server, username and password, and then the database name. They also give us names for each of the devices in the databases. So we can start out by setting up the PLCs here. So we'll go to the configure section, go through to our OPC UA devices, add a device, and in this case, let's go ahead and add the control logics first. So we take a look at the information here. Control logics is sitting at this IP address, and so we can just copy that in. That device is called main, and we'll give it the IP address right there. If they give us the slot, it's in slot 0, so that's all we should need. So we hit save. We show this, and it'll start connecting, and there it is. It's connected. So now we add one more device and micrologics, and then we've got this guy. So this is conveyors. We've already added them once in here for demonstration purposes. So we've got autocomplete for some of these. And that is connecting right now, and it will be connected as soon as it determines the protocol. I'll go ahead and set up the database connections at the same time. We've got Microsoft SQL Server. We'll set that up to match this guy. So ERP system. There's the IP address, and I'll just go ahead, and we've got the information here as well. Set that guy up. Username is SA. Password is SQL Server. So this is exactly how you would do it on your instance of Ignition as you're installing things. Our database is widgets, and we'll create a new connection there. So the setup for MySQL is exactly the same. I don't think I need to take you through that. But that gets you set up. If we go over to status here, we've got our database connection, our devices, and disconnected. So it didn't like the connection here. So we go through and troubleshoot that later. At this point, we can switch over to the designer. Oh, there it goes. Now it's connected. And Travis will take it from here and show the initial setup for the screens.
Okay. So as Kevin did here, he basically got connected up to a couple of different PLCs and a couple of different databases. What we did at this point, we launched the designer so we can start configuring a project. To give you an idea of the web launch architecture, download the application, and we're able to log into the system. Before we actually go into that, I want to come back to the gateway just for a second. Once we get connected to our databases and to our PLCs, there is a way in Ignition to just make sure that we are connected, make sure we can look at the PLCs and see values. We have an OPC Quit client here, which allows us to go in and take a look at those two particular devices. I can see my main. I can see that I'm actually browsing the PLC. I can see what's available to us in that scope. I can also look at the conveyors PLC and make sure that we can actually browse that as well. So I can see all the files that are open. So we are in fact connected, and we are working successfully. What we did is we created some devices using Ignition's built-in OPC UA server. And these devices, we have a number of drivers you can use for like Allen Bradley Ethernet suite of drivers. We have the Modbus TCP suite, and we have the Siemens TCP, which allows you to connect to various PLCs. We also have a UDP and TCP plugin that allows you to connect up to barcode scanners and scales. And so that's something you can do as well. If your customer has barcode scanners or scales that they want to interface with, you can actually add the driver or device to look at those. So these are all the ones that are built into Ignition. However, Ignition is based on OPC, as many products are, where we can connect up to our own OPC UA server or other third-party applications like Kepware, Matricon, RSLink, etc. So you can get, if you don't have, if you have PLCs, your customer has PLCs that aren't included in the base installed Ignition, you can still use other products to get connected up to those particular devices. Now with the databases here, it's pretty simple to get connected up to the databases. You can connect up to one or more database connections, and you can bring in data from multiple sources and, of course, store data in these different connections. Now, if we come back just for a second, back to our Widgets Unlimited architecture that Kevin was going over, talking about how we laid out a sketch of what we want that particular screen to look like. The architecture is really the foundation. If you need to kind of have a navigation scheme set up and kind of have a pretty good idea of what you want to set up before you go into start designing a new project from scratch. So here we have pretty much a two-tiered approach, where we have the first tier is just various sections like overview, controls, trending, alarms, recipes, reports, and admin. And then below each of those, we have separate items. So like for controls, we have line 1, line 2. So it's kind of a two-tiered approach. There are several different layout or navigation schemes you can set up. A single-tiered using tabs, a dual-tiered using tabs, maybe using drop-down lists, a multi-tier using a tree view. There's many different ways you can start out a new project. So for this two-tier approach, we can actually go back to the Ignition Gateway, and we can start with the projects that we already give you. We have a number of projects you can start from. We call them skeleton projects that already have navigation and a lot of the structures built into them, so you can just start with it. So here I go to my projects, and I can upload a project from a backup file. So I have one here on my desktop, and that is a skeleton project. It's a dual tab, so it's a two-tier with tabs. I go ahead and upload that project, and here you can see that project exists. I can go in and edit that project, and we can basically change the title if I want to call it Widgets Unlimited, and I'll even give the name of it here, Widgets. And then down at the very bottom, I can actually attach this project to a different authentication scheme. When we talk about security in the next webinars, we'll come into that, like Active Directory, or in this case, it's going to be a database authentication. I can connect up to different databases. So here I have the ERP database, so I can go ahead and talk to, and then save my changes, and I'm ready to go. Now, when we go into Designer is where I can actually configure that project and set up that navigation structure. So this is a skeleton project we can start from. We can then build onto it pretty easily. I'm going to go ahead and launch the Designer. As you'll see, when I launch it, it's actually downloading the application onto my machine. I don't have to have anything pre-installed to launch it. It'll just go ahead and get me right into the Designer. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my Designer. The username and password by default, Ignition is admin and password. So we're going to go ahead and I can see my widgets project that I just uploaded. Go ahead and open that project. And in this project, all of the windows that come with that skeleton project exist up here in the Windows section. So if you want to get an idea of what this looks like in the runtime, I can go and quickly launch it as an application. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it as a client, the runtime version. And so when I get in, here you can see that two-tiered tab approach, where I have these various sections up here, and below that I have the different screens I can go into. So we can go and modify the skeleton project to adjust to the one that we were showing in that PowerPoint here, that's for the widget unlimited. So let's go ahead and show how that would actually be created. So in the Designer, I can open up my navigation window, and that here has the tabs that I can set up. So for example, the first tab up here for section 1, maybe I want to actually rename that to Overview. So I can go in the Customizer and rename it to Overview. I can press Apply. I go to my second one, which happens to be the Controls, and I can go in and name it Controls. And then below those, I can set up the bottom tab. So for Overview, I can set up a tab that would actually open up some specific window. So maybe on my main window here, I can open up the first Overview window, and I call that Overview. So it really is a matter of just telling these tabs which window to open and what the name is. And once we set those up, we have our navigation structure built in place. So each of these tabs will open up the window, and I have a folder here for all the main windows that we have. So we can basically easily set up that navigation scheme in Ignition with just a few clicks, basically. We can also, of course, bring in the logo for the Widgets Unlimited company. So I'm going to delete the Ignition one, and I can go up here. I can bring in SVGs into Ignition, or I can bring in images. And I happen to have just PNGs right now for my Widgets Unlimited. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the image component, and I'm going to come over here and select the image that I want to use. I'm going to upload it from my computer, and it's on my desktop. And again, they are PNG files. So here are my two widget logos. There's a for a white background and for a dark background. Now I have them in here. Now I have a pretty dark background, so I'm going to use the white version. And I can then, of course, make it smaller, kind of put that up there in the top left, and save my project. So basically, once we're done configuring the tabs, putting our logo in there, we have a really good foundation for the rest of our project. To give you an idea of what this will look like in its being completed, I can show you one here. This is an actual completed using the same navigation scheme where I have all of my tabs at the top that go between these different sections. And then below those, I click on these line 1, line 2s, or any of the below tabs to open up different windows at the bottom. Okay, so it's really easy to create that navigation structure and to get really started inside of Ignition. So at this point, for laying the foundation, you have to ask the right questions. You have to be able to lay that foundation to get the project architecture set up correctly. And you can always start with the skeleton project and build on top of it. And so once you have that, then you can start thinking about the design phase, which is the next part. So I'm going to turn it back over to Don here, and he's going to bring us into our Q&A section.
Travis, thanks so much. Kevin, thanks a lot. I think we got some questions coming up on the tabs there, so I'm just going to do maybe a little quick review as we go into Q&A. Encourage people again to take advantage of that tab on the console for questions, because Kevin and Travis are ready to dig in with any direction you want to go with that. And just a quick review from today: detailed planning clearly will keep surprises in the rest of the development process at a minimum. It's critical defining your project, assembling a solid project architecture, and committing to a plan of action will set you up for success in that design phase. And Ignition really is designed to give you the flexibility and freedom to be innovative when designing your project. Also want to encourage you, just in the last tab there, to visit the resources section of our website. There's more information there. In addition, the white paper that's there includes several tools that will help you in the planning phase of the project. There's a planning phase checklist. There's a list of project definition questions, and there's a SCADA software evaluation questions appendix to that. So those should be of use to you in trying to really get your project on track as quickly and effectively as you can in this phase. So with that, I'm going to sort of go back and forth with you guys, Kevin and Travis, and if you want to point to questions and stuff, we can pick them out. But let me just maybe I'll start with one, just because I know this is an overall one. And either you can answer or both. What are some of the biggest mistakes that SCADA project developers make in the planning phase? So who wants to take that first? Kevin, you want to start with that?
Sure, I can start with that. One of the biggest mistakes that I've found that people make is that not really grasping the entirety of a project. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with the concept of feature creep, where one more thing gets added on, one more thing gets added on, one more thing gets added on, and then the scope of the project gets really, really big. As soon as they start seeing management or the customer, or whoever the key players involved are, as soon as they start seeing what capabilities the project has, they might want some more things. So really talking through all the capabilities that the project will have at the beginning and getting as many of those new features just planned from the get-go is really a good way to avoid that.
Great. Travis, you want to comment on that too?
I think a lot of the mistakes is that a lot of people don't really have a planning phase. Customers kind of guide them in a way that, yeah, I need a project done next week or the next 2 weeks. And you start going down that path of just nothing's really figured out. And I really feel this is the most important phase of your project. You really should sit down and create those tasks and put them on a timeline. As soon as you do that, you'll start seeing how long certain things take, and if I have enough time to get it completed. And you always got to take in consideration not only what you're going to be doing up front, it's how much we're going to be putting into the system, and of course there's going to be testing at the very end that you have to go over. So planning can really help you avoid some of the pitfalls and cause a lot less stress. So I think if you just make this the most important part and plan it out correctly, I think it'll make it much, much easier for you.
Thanks, Travis. Roman, your question is about slides being available after the webinar. I do want to mention to you that I forgot to do a little housekeeping, that we will have this webinar available on our website. So for you wanting to share it with other members of your team, that's going to be available. Or if for folks, we'll let people know who didn't make it also, that they can see it in an archive form too. So here's a question from Rob. The only problem with trying to do a planning phase is that since nobody knows its capabilities, nobody knows what to ask. So that's a statement with a question. It's an interrogative statement. So Travis, you want to take that first?
That's certainly a good question, and you need to come up with a good answer to that. We have a list of questions that you can download from the website. It'll be available for the webinar that you can start probing the customers for. But really, you need to develop your own list of questions for these different features that are out there. And of course, if you're looking at Ignition, we can provide you a huge list of features that Ignition has to offer that you can go through and ask your customers. But it really is just getting to what they actually need. I know customers, they say one thing, but they might mean another. You really have to keep probing them until you get the right information. It may take a couple of days, but it's well worth it when you have a good idea of what they want. And ask more than one person. The plant manager may have a different opinion of what they want versus the people that are actually going to be using it. So bring in the operators into the discussion, because they're the ones using it on a day-to-day basis. So figure out how everybody collectively needs to see the information, and that will really help you in that planning phase, I think.
Anything you want to comment on that, or we'll go to the next question?
We can go to the next one.
No problem, Kevin.
That was great.
Okay. Tamara, I got your apology for not having a mic, but don't worry about it because I don't have any live mics anyway, so your typed-in question is just fine. It says, what's the best for launching the project? Use virtual server like Amazon or other provider, or to use our own PC? Want to comment on that, Travis?
That's certainly a good question. With Ignition, it can be installed on a virtual machine. It can be in an Amazon EC2 instance. It can be on different platforms that are out there in the cloud, or there are inherent security things that you have to think about when you put stuff into the cloud. So if you address those, then there's no worries about putting it up there. However, it's always very easy to just put it on some desktop PC or some server that you have at the facility. It's very easy to move Ignition around later on when you determine I want to put in the cloud 2 weeks from now. So it doesn't really matter, but you want to think really about who has access to it, if you want it on the public internet or not. So that's kind of the questions that are there.
And you'll also want to work with, if you're working with an external customer, work with their IT and find out what they really want from their servers. If they prefer to have something on their virtualized infrastructure, if they've got virtual servers in place that they want to house it there, rather than just starting on the cloud or starting with certain assumptions, talking to those people is always a great idea.
Yeah, and Kevin mentioned a key word there, I feel, IT. And I know a lot of people out there think that IT is a barrier to your projects, and that by bringing in IT, it's going to make planning and all of this go a lot longer, and IT is not going to be on board with your decisions. They're going to be sitting there very pessimistic, and they don't want to work with you. But if you kind of bring them to discussion at the beginning, yeah, they may be pessimistic at the beginning. But if you bring them in, tell them what we're going to be putting in, tell them the structures, that we're using databases, we're using things that they understand, and web services, things like that. The more you include them, the more they're going to be on board with you. And that is a true statement. I have seen it over and over again. Once you just go and talk to them a little bit and educate them on what's coming in, they're going to be a big proponent for you, and they're going to guide your project. They're going to get a server ready for you. They're going to get virtual machines ready for you. They're going to let you use the corporate database that's already being backed up and ready to go. You don't have to do anything because the IT typically is there for you.
I don't think you can overemphasize that. I mean, having IT be your friend, and it's certainly something we've seen with Ignition over the years, is that really there's no us and them in this process. It's only us, and we are all focused on getting our project done properly and bringing IT in. And also, it's nomenclature to understand. Like Travis said, it's not going to be something that's unfamiliar to them. They're actually going to be very comfortable integrating through the entire enterprise as projects expand and go to different levels up to the MES layer. So I think you're going to find that to be a real positive aspect to bring IT in early. Next question from Anthony. Can a single instance of Ignition be utilized to develop and execute SCADA and MES functions across multiple facilities?
Yes, certainly. Ignition is very unique, and if you look at our licensing and our philosophies here, it's different than the competitors in this market. Ignition, you install the software on a single server, and from there you can launch unlimited clients. You have unlimited tags, screens, etc. So from a licensing standpoint, if you can connect to your PLCs and remote facilities, you can do it all from one server and one location. It's very, very easy, and in fact, some companies do that. The only thing to consider in that situation is that if you're going over the internet talking to PLCs or over a corporate VPN, something like that, if that internet connection was to go out, you would lose communication. So it's always best to put ignitions closer to the PLCs, but certainly one ignition can control multiple facilities at the same time, no problem.
Great, thanks. Kevin, I think this question from Vincent, how are you connecting to different network IPs?
That's a very good question. He's probably looking at the fact that we connected 10.20.4 and 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Basically, all it is on the router. You set the subnet mask to 255.255.0.0, and you can talk to any one of those schemes. Yeah, that's really all of what's happening there.
We just have our internal network set up in that way.
Yeah, nice and simple. There's a question here about where is this project going to be available on our website?
Oh yeah.
We're in the resources section. There will be a link to it from. This webinar will be available there, and you'll see it, and there will be a link to all of the project resources, all the example projects we have. There are actually 7 example projects you can start from, single-tiered, dual-tiered, and multi-tiered, plus a mobile project you can work with, and you can just modify to get a foundation for your project.
So they're available for download then from our various resources on the website. Okay, cool.
And I think we're also going to email everybody that attended this webinar so you can get access to those projects just via a simple link from your email.
Great. All right. There's a question relating to testing, and how is testing being done on this? So will you address testing of the project and how to plan testing in the design phase? That's a question from Vladimir. So
we most certainly will be including testing in this in these series of webinars. This first one was geared just towards laying the foundation, asking the right questions, and getting the foundation of your project to start from. The next one will be actually part 2 will be implementing, the actual project, how you would use the object-oriented and templates to make a project of your dreams, essentially. The third one will be geared more towards the final stages of the project, where testing will be involved in that one.
That's great. I also want to emphasize here, you see on your screen here in the Q&A slide, Jim Meisler, Vanessa Garcia, Myron Hertling, Shane Miller. There's a lot of questions here that I think would really lead to, you ought to have a demo. You ought to get a chance to call Jim, Vanessa, Myron, or Shane, and let's give them a chance to set up a demo so you can dig in and see how it applies to your particular situation. Obviously, through this webinar series, we're going to give you all the resources available for you to just be empowered to go forward, but I do highly recommend that you get a particular demo for your own unique circumstances. Here's another question I'm going to ask to, I think I'll ask it to you, Kevin. Which databases and PLCs can you connect to in Ignition? Limitations, not limitations, what can you connect?
Well, Ignition is pretty unique in that it leverages the power of the Java platform. So it can connect to anything that has a JDBC driver, which is pretty much any database that's out there in terms of what you might actually come across at the customer side. It can talk to MySQL, it can talk to MS SQL, it can talk to Oracle, it can talk to all of the littler guys too. You'd be hard-pressed to find a database that doesn't have a driver. As far as PLCs go, it can connect to just about any PLC as well. As Travis mentioned, there are some built-in drivers. There's also OBC servers that are available that you can get. You can connect to Kepware, or you can connect to Matricon. And Kepware and Matricon have a lot of different drivers for a lot of different PLCs. Since they have an OBC UA now, we can connect to pretty much any PLC that's out there.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So just a question about compatible OS with a question mark after it.
So basically I saw this question there, and I wanted to address it, just the fact that Ignition is 100% cross-platform. Because it's built on the Java platform, you can install Ignition on Windows, any flavor of Windows, 32 or 64-bit, Linux, and of course Mac OS X. both the server and the clients. So you have any freedom that you like if you chose Ignition.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go right into the next question. We're trying to get to a couple more here with the time we have left. How does Ignition handle redundancy? What is the bandwidth required between redundant servers? That's a question from Mark Crossan.
That's a good question. Ignition does have redundancy built in. It's a basic master backup method where you have two Ignition servers. You let them know about each other through just like putting a simple IP address on both of them. And once you do that, they hook up automatically and synchronize the projects across the two. But only the master is going to be running at any given time. If that master was to go away, the backup would assume responsibility. All the clients would seamlessly switch over, and it's just a real easy thing to set up and work with. Yeah, so it's just meant to have the simple master backup use case.
As far as the bandwidth required goes, that's going to depend on your project and exactly what you're doing and how much information needs to be sent to the backup. There are also a couple of different modes. You can set up the backup for warm or cold mode. If it's in a cold mode, it's going to take less. If it's warm mode, it keeps the connections to all the PLCs alive from that one as well, so you have a very quick failover.
But really, between the master and the backup, there really isn't a whole lot of, besides handshaking, there isn't a whole lot of messages to send back and forth. It would be only if you make a change to your project, it would synchronize that across the two. Or really, it's just a real simple kind of keep alive that goes back and forth.
Travis, where exactly is the white paper on the website? Do you know exactly where it is?
Yeah, the white paper is on the resources page of the website.
Okay.
So if you go to inductiveautomation.com, you'll see a resources in the top menu. Click on that, you'll see the white paper in there. In that resource with the white paper, you'll find a link. Today, probably the next couple hours, you'll see a link to all of these project downloads and backups and lists that you can have access to their materials of the course, as well as the PowerPoint here.
Okay, great. I'm going to try and get to a couple more with the couple minutes we have left, so I'll let you guys chime in here. Sometimes, this is Sardar's question, sometimes a lot of tags makes the SCADA software slow responding. What about Ignition?
That's a good question. So Ignition, basically we've done a lot of optimizations and in Ignition to allow you to have a lot of tags in your system. We've done several benchmarks, and having a couple 100,000 tags in Ignition, scanning those values every second, every 5 seconds, it's very capable of handling that amount and that load. Really depends on the hardware you install Ignition on. The better the hardware, the more memory you have, the more tags you can have. If you install it on a simple laptop with 2 gigs of memory, you're not going to be able to have as many tags as a dual-core or quad-core server with 8 gigs of memory. So you got to kind of look at hardware and look at how often these tags are changing as well. If you have 100,000 tags and they're all changing really, really fast, then you can have less than if you had 500,000 tags or only a few of them are changing at a time. So hopefully that gives you a somewhat of an answer to that. There will be a benchmark on our benchmark white paper on our website that will provide a lot more information about this shortly.
Great, thanks. All right, sort of coming to the end of our time here, so I'll try and put in the last couple questions. Kevin, I think you answered this. What is the programming languages for scripting? Abdul asked that question.
Actually, we didn't talk about that. There are a couple of different languages, but the main one that does the more advanced scripting is just Python, which is Java's implementation of Python called Jython. There's also an expression language, and that's very well documented in the Ignition user manual.
Great. Okay, with just the last couple minutes we have, I'm just going to have it open-ended to each of you guys to make any final comments. You don't have to, but if you want to say anything final to this audience, and also then we'll move forward to encourage folks to attend the next one. So with Kevin, any final comments to the audience today?
Well, I think these were all a lot of great questions. I wish we could have gotten to all of them. There's still a few that we have here in the queue. So hopefully we'll be able to get to as many as we can next time too. But thanks for coming. I appreciate you being here and talking to you guys, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Great. Will you please also emphasize the forum when you finish off here? I know you were going to do that anyway, weren't you, Travis?
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. This series is intended to really show you how to plan a project from start to finish, not only in the planning phase, but in development, how to make it easier on you, especially when if you choose Ignition as the platform to go with. So our idea is just to give you as much information as possible with project backups and materials that will aid in your process. Now, along the way, if you have questions. If you download Ignition, you have questions. There's several ways to get support. You can go to our website. We have a great forum on inductiveautomation.com/forum. It's a great community for people to ask questions to get answers by us and by your peers. We also have, you can email us at support@inductiveautomation.com, and you could even just call us. If you look at our website, there's a number. You can give us a call, and we're more than happy to help you out. So there's a number of ways to get help. If you do want to learn a lot more about Ignition and see the inner workings, I would encourage you guys to attend one of our training classes. We have the 5-day core training class. You can see the information on the website about the ones that are upcoming on the events page. But it covers all the basics of Ignition, all the real core set of features that are there. After that class, you'll have a really good understanding of how to create a project. Using that in combination with the Design Like a Pro series, I think it's really going to give you a solid structure for new projects.
Great, thanks, Travis. I'm just going to throw in one answer to a question that came up here from Sam Lowe. Can Ignition provide services during planning phase like gap analysis and define user requirements? Yes, we'll work with you at any phase to assist you to be successful with your project.
We also do offer web demonstrations with integrators and their customers. For anybody, we offer web demonstrations where we show you how Ignition works and answer the technical questions that you may have that we didn't get to address today.
Thanks, Travis. As I mentioned even earlier when we started out, it really is the mission and commitment of the whole team here at Inductive Automation to help you be successful and to really respect the relationship you have with your customers and honor it and support it in any way we possibly can. You see a slide up there that says Design Like a Pro series. So developing dynamic HMI SCADA projects with speed and precision. This is going to be March 13th at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can go to the resource section of our website. You can sign up for part 2 of the series. You can also share part 1 with anyone you think would benefit from it. We'll cover in the part 2 how to use dynamic templates to streamline your design process, how to bind real-time data to objects in an object-oriented design environment, and how to leverage SQL databases to design powerful HMI SCADA projects. So with that, we're at the conclusion of today's webinar. Thanks very much for attending. Hope it was valuable to you. Have a great day.